Welcome to A Growing Concern. This first segment is with Marc Koller, is that how it's pronounced?
Yep.
And he is running for Blumenauer's 3rd district seat.
Yep.
And that's going to be what, November? That's
Yep.
that's when all hell is going to possibly break loose.
That's right.
That's when all the Democrats and all the women are supposed to do some stomping. But we'll see if it works out that way. A lot can happen between now and then.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of different ways to go about this. I guess my first question to you, because I looked at your website, we've got that to be put up here eventually, and you're way more progressive than Blumenauer, although he's really one of the far lefties of the whole Congress, I think.
Well, they rate him as 57th most liberal. If you go how they...
Out of how many? 400?
300 and some odd, right.
So he's 57th from number 1 then.
Right. Which...
I would have thought he was higher than that.
Well, he votes with a lot of the liberal agendas, even though he doesn't push for them or fight for them, and eventually he signs on to those things, so he gets pegged as a liberal, because he certainly is a liberal on some of the causes. But his history is that he is really a big supporter of big business and corporations.
Exactly, yeah.
So, you know, I don't know if you want to get into that right away or not, but just let me know how you want me to go about it.
Well, I know that the situation with Blumenauer is I've been in his office more than once with a video camera while people were raising hell with his aides or giving them petitions and all. So that was usually over what the Korean fair trade.
Yeah, the TPP was a big issue.
All that, because I think they finally got him to back off on the fast track,
right,
which he was all for. And anybody would be for that doesn't even deserve to be up to 57, as far as I'm concerned. But there are a lot of ways to go, like I said, on this. But I would think probably just you mentioned homelessness, and a couple other things on your website in that little, I don't know what it would be, a little preamble or whatever to what you're all about. And I think considering what's going on in this town, could you really have much effect on Portland?
Give you an idea. I'm on a task force in Gresham, which is the far end of the district, and working with some of these folks who are, you and I, we're not young kids anymore, right? And you've got a lot of folks who our age or older, the boomers, who are, there are 10,000 people every day turning 65. The baby boomers are turning in mass
know that.
now. Yeah. And many of them worked their whole lives expecting that there was going to be pensions, which disappeared. Maybe they didn't make a whole lot of money in their life, so their Social Security, especially women whose husbands may have died and they don't have a whole lot. And there's a lot of folks who are living on between $800 and $1,200–1,400 a month, Social Security, and paying $400, $500, $600 a month rent, and all of a sudden it goes to $800 a month or $900 a month, and they're having to give up their medicine, they're having to give up their cars, they're giving up so much just to keep a roof over their head,
and
many of them
proper nourishment,
right, and many of them are becoming homeless at 75, 80 years old. They're becoming homeless.
And some of them are veterans.
And the veterans is a whole nother group. That's right. And the veterans benefits. So if you put that group together, the question you ask, what can we do as a government? I'm working on a bill that if I was elected, I would present, which basically says that, and there's a lot of intricacies in trying to get bills. People say, oh, you can never get bills through Congress.
Oh, I know that.
But anyway, essentially what we're trying to say is that if you are living in a situation where, I'm saying about 90% of your income comes from fixed income like Social Security, and you have no other real significant assets, that a landlord won't be able to raise your rent more than the cost of living adjustment of Social Security. It seems like a fairly simple concept that in the same way, if you're a landlord and most of the income that you get from this property is from people who are living on that fixed income, the state can't raise your property taxes any more than that cost of living adjustment. So we want to be able to say to people, if you're lucky enough to finally be in a place that you can live in, we want to do everything we can to make sure that you don't ever become homeless. That's one side of the problem. The other side of the problem is how do we get the people off the street who don't have homes at all?
That's the one that's most glaring, yeah.
Well, there's, and we've categorized, we can talk all night just about homelessness, but, there are lots of reasons why people become homeless. Certainly the mentally ill is another problem. You shouldn't have people on the street who are incapable of taking care of themselves. We have a responsibility to care for them. Yeah, one of the first things when I moved to Portland years ago, people said, "Oh yeah, Portland is the place the young people come to retire." Yeah, there's
The whole Portlandia thing.
yeah, there's a group of people. I mean, I was young once, and I traveled around the country in a tent, and I guess you could say I was homeless because I was camping out and staying in places.
You had your home with you, though.
Yeah, and it was fun. And there are some people on the street who I see who have $600 REI tents, and they got their guitar and their dogs, and they're just having a good time, right? Okay, well, I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about, like you said, the veterans who maybe they're suffering PTSD or they have other kinds of physical illnesses that prohibit them from working. And maybe they got a disability income of $800 a month. Well, you can't live in Portland on $800 a month. So it's enough money to buy cigarettes, to get a little bit of food, maybe you get some food stamps, so where are you going to live? So they're in shacks, or they're in tents, or they're under tarps, and they're sitting on the corner with cardboard signs.
And they're getting swept about once a
Yeah,
every 2 weeks.
and the police are considering it a crime. And that's another thing we got to do is we got to get laws that basically say that being homeless is not a crime. And
well, it's a crime of society, but not of the individual.
exactly right. And so the federal government, the good thing that federal government can do, not that they do it, is they spend money. The trillions of dollars that goes to defense and goes to all these other places can be better spent, and it's going to take a strong-willed federal government to shift those monies to where it's really most needed. And that's really what bothers me so much about the two parties. Neither one of them have done squat about changing those priorities. We look at the last 16 years before Trump, and we can't even get into the whole Trump insanity, but even the 16 years before that, the 8 years of Obama, the 8 years of Bush, the military expanded. We've been in...
And Clinton, too, probably.
Yeah, we've been in... Obama had more troops in Afghanistan than Bush did. I mean, we've been spending trillions of dollars, literally, on other countries fighting wars and not taking care of the people in this country that we have a responsibility to do. And I think that's really the essence of what the progressive agenda is really all about. People say, oh, you're a socialist. Well, caring for people doesn't mean you're a communist or a socialist. It means you care about the things that a government is supposed to be doing. And those things are taking care of its citizens, taking care of the ones who can't take care of themselves. Yeah, like I said, I don't care about the 19-year-old kid with the guitar who's smoking pot on the street and living in his tent. Okay, there's public lands and they're allowed to be on public property, and that's okay. But it's all those others in the homeless side. And like I said, also the seniors and the other veterans. There's a lot of things that we should be doing that we're not doing.
Well, like I'm always fond of saying when this comes up, what we call primitive peoples, they took care of each other. The people who were mentally disturbed, they were actually revered, and the people didn't sit outside the village with a cup begging money because they took care of each other now, and they were on subsistence. And if we're all this income that we have and all the wealth that these third world, first world nations have, and we can't do the same thing, it just is glaring to me.
Yeah, certainly there are countries that do it much better than we do. And if we consider ourselves to be the richest country in the world, and we're not doing it, and I think some of it, you look historically, like you were talking about. Yeah, there was a time when families stayed together. You had generations in the same house, and you had your elderly people who didn't have to be left alone because they're, the children take over the house and the parents continue to live there.
That's still going on.
That's right.
In the East, especially.
Yeah, there's some of that going on, but not in this country.
No.
And it's some of it is the change that just happens, but we need to take better care of the people who can't take care of themselves. It's real simple to just put it that way, but that's one of the reasons I'm trying to get, because locally, sure, there's a lot of people who are trying to do things locally, and I think Portland's a great city for activism that are trying to do things. There's issues with where the money comes from, but God, there's a lot of money in this city that comes in through taxes. And where it all goes, it isn't going all in the right place. The mayor's talking about hiring 53 more policemen. What is that going to do for the problems? We don't need more police. We need more effective police. We need the police to be more engaged in the communities rather than being a military force, quite honestly.
Well, they just had a thing come from the Justice Department a while back that had a lot of things that Portland should be doing. I don't remember exactly what a lot of them were, but there was it was researched by the Justice Department because we were having so much problems with the police here that they came up and they had some things that we could do, and some of that money could be spent implementing what they had to say.
Right. And unfortunately, you know, what the mayor has done is, you know, hired a black woman. And then that's supposed to be the answer, because we now have a black woman in charge.
And her name's Outlaw.
Right, but, you know,
That's crazy.
First thing she said, I heard in an interview saying, I'm not here to change anything. Well, then what are you here for? You know, because it's going to take a big change if I'm working with a lot of folks now who have had children and relatives killed by the Portland Police Department. And, you know, recently the one who was shot to death in the clinic down in town.
The clinic, yeah.
And he was mentally ill. Yeah, he had a knife, but he wasn't going to, the worst he was going to do was hurt himself.
Hurt himself.
And you don't kill him to stop him from hurting himself.
But they've done it before.
That's
They
right.
meaning nationwide, not just local.
And if you saw that, I know so many people saw that video, these guys were dressed in full armor, body armor, and tactical. And there must have been 15, 20 guys there, all dressed. I mean, they could have taken on the Sandinistas with the amount of people that were there.
The firepower they must have had.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like one guy recently, you know, they brought a tank onto his property. And killed him. He was on his own property, drunk, in his pickup truck, shooting his gun on his own property, and they came in with a tank and sharpshooters. You know, it's like, is that really how we deal with people in this? Well, unfortunately, it is.
They're not even dressed with that much armor in Iraq.
It's true.
You know, I've seen things on Facebook.
I don't mean to laugh about
that.
it, but it's
well,
a lot of change has to happen.
It's ludicrous anyway,
Yeah.
is what it is.
Yep.
So yeah, homelessness is a really an important one. I was happy to see that was on your list there, because that's typically viewed as a local problem.
Yep.
And obviously it's a social problem, and you know the federal government's at the head of that, the apex of that triangle, so to speak. And if you want to take that to Washington, that's incredible, because a lot of people can point out what's wrong, but to have ideas ahead of time of what you can do about it.
Yeah, and the way, you know, most of what people are concerned about now in this midterm election is the Democrats taking back the House, because they feel that, well, if the Democrats are back in charge, you know, then, you know, we'll get some pressure on Trump and his world to make some changes. But, you know, they've been in charge before. And it isn't just enough, you know, the Bernie Sanders universe and all that people, they talk about, you know, just blue won't do anymore. It's not enough to just be a Democrat.
Well, Obama had both houses. What did he get?
That's right.
You know?
We still don't have universal health care. You know, that's, to me, you know, the homelessness is critically important to the people here, because it's something you see every day. But the health care, to me, is the overriding issue that we have to, and the Democrats, and Blumenauer has been one who said publicly several times, it's on the table in the future, you know, but he's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from insurance companies. You know, there's no incentive to stop taking that money from the insurance companies. And the Democrats are almost as bad about it as the Republicans are.
Well, the only incentive is, and there is an incentive, is because if they don't take it and toe the line, then that money will go to an opponent.
That's right.
And they'll be primaried out.
Yep.
Which is, you know, kind of difficult possibly with someone like Blumenauer, who's pretty staunch. But at the same time, it's happened to people who have been on both sides, right and left, that have been from incumbents from very strong areas that lost out. I think it just happened just the other day.
Well, if you look at what's happened in California.
Sanford, I think.
So much about what, you know, California seems to always be, what happens in California, it's a bellwether for what may happen in the rest of the country.
Sure.
Seeing that they're the fourth largest economy in the world.
It's up to fourth now.
Or is it sixth? It's one of the top
it's
half
up,
a dozen economies.
It's surprisingly high, yeah.
And the governor's race there is almost entirely based on Medicare for all. I mean, that's the big issue between the two governors who are running. You know, are we going to make universal health care or single payer, whatever you want to call it, in California? If it passes in California, and you show that you can do that in an economy in a state like that, then other states will follow. It's like marijuana reform was the same way.
It started down there.
That's right. When you get, you know, enough states and enough places, sooner or later the federal government's going to have to give up on their criminalization. And but, you know, they don't want to give up because there's also a prison business that's dependent upon people in prisons, and you know, you can't get. You got to keep arresting people if you want to have a very successful prison business. You know,
they all hook together, because you know, I was thinking earlier, the whole homelessness thing, or houselessness, as some people like to call it around here. A lot of that has to do with the healthcare industry, and people just they lose everything because of you know, we're only just one serious operation away from being homeless.
That's what I said about why I think medical, if you've got your health, everything else can come from there. But if you don't have your health, like you said, one illness, I'm lucky enough to be 65 where I have Medicare. And I had a fairly serious medical condition not too long ago. And, I had to pay practically nothing.
It would have broke the bank, right?
Yeah, either I would have had to spend every penny I've saved my entire life or go bankrupt. Or, like the doctor told me, he said he meets lots of men who put off medical because they're trying to wait till they're 65. And many of them die on the way. Mm-hmm. Or, they're not getting any treatment along the way, so diabetes and other kinds of things.
So it gets really bad.
So it gets really bad. So by the time, and that's the whole, we can go on forever about, what are the medical costs involved in not having access to medical care for everyone. People just they have to go to the emergency room, mm-hmm. which is the most expensive way to get medical care. So if you can't get treated because you don't have any access to medical care, you wait until it's so severe, you wind up in the emergency rooms, which cost a fortune. And,
way over cost.
Yeah, so but I keep seeing, Blumenauer finally, after 22 years, he signed on to Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill. Finally.
Really?
Yeah. And now he calls himself a co-sponsor. Yeah, because he signed on. But the first 18 years or 19 years he was in Congress, he didn't do anything about
mm-hmm.
it. Bernie's been fighting for that for a long time. That's been around a long time. So, yeah, when they, politicians, unfortunately, many of them, and I consider him to be an excellent politician. He gets on TV when he wants to. He says a lot of the things that people want to hear, and he's a very nice guy, and he's good for pot reform, and he's good on bicycles. But fighting for the things that we really need, nobody's doing that. And, that's the reason I ran as an independent on the Independent Party, is because they make it impossible to unseat an incumbent in a primary, because they have these closed primaries. Mm-hmm. And they have this sore loser law here, too, if you're aware, that if I were to run in the Democratic primary, which would be impossible to knock him off, you couldn't run again in the general election for another party. So you have to make a choice. Do you try to unseat an incumbent in the primary where the party makes it almost impossible for people to do that? Or do you try to do something which has never been done in this country? Bernie Sanders is the only independent who's won a congressional seat since World War II. And he did that partly because he was mayor at the time and he had already been in, so what I'm trying to do here as an independent in Congress has just not been done before. And,
so you're running as an independent then?
On the Independent Party, which is a major party in Oregon.
Yeah.
But I also have the endorsement of the Pacific Green Party.
And probably Working Families? Maybe?
Working Families, I'm working on them. And,
good folks.
And the Progressive Party as well. Yeah, the Working Families is a great group because they care about working families, obviously. And one of their big issues with Earl is his policies on trade. He has not been a supporter of the working people. Mm-mm. 95% of his money comes from PACs and large corporations. He also, strangely enough, people, I don't know if everyone's always aware of it, but as a superdelegate, even though Bernie Sanders won an overwhelmingly majority in the primary against Hillary, Earl voted for Hillary. Who is he representing? If he's representing the people of his district and his district overwhelmingly wants Bernie to be the candidate, then who is he for?
He's for the DNC.
Sure.
That's what it is.
So just because he's a nice guy, and I have to say, he spent his whole life in public service. He has been one of those votes that could be counted on for the liberal agenda, and that's all nice stuff, but we got to get beyond that.
He's part of the Just Us group.
Yeah, good way to put it.
That's the way he is. We were talking a while back, you're saying about the situation, how bad health care is, but the people that are making those rules got great health care. And they're the same ones that sit in a room with only men making rules that have to do with women.
Yep.
I don't notice you had anything to say on that little thing on your website having to do with making things more equal for women. But that should be pretty much on top of the agenda. Not even the fact that they're women, just they're people. And why make it different for one group than the other?
Yeah, there are so many things. It's funny how I remember early on after Donald got elected, he came out saying, "I didn't realize how complicated healthcare was." Yes, and Hillary, even when Bill was president, she worked hard. And
right out of the gate.
That's
I remember
right.
That.
You have a lot of interests. You have a lot of things, but all you have to do is look at the way Medicare works. We have two great examples of how it can work. We have the VA, which Donald is trying to privatize, but the VA serves 20 million veterans, and they do it through essentially a single-payer situation.
Basically,
they get to negotiate for all those people for drug prices. And we have Medicare, which works great. I pay, and I'm very happy to make a monthly payment. If everybody paid an equal share, now the funding for Medicare for All is what scares people. They think, oh, it's going to be all kinds of new taxes. Well, it's going to be, yes, it has to be paid for, but the overall savings to the country is going to be enormous. It's just paying for it differently. You know, people who I talk to, they say, well, I don't want it because I've got a good job and I've got insurance through my employer. And you say, well, how much do you pay every month? Well, I pay $400 a month for my family. What's your deductible? What's your annual limits?
Yeah, that's,
you know,
that's when the rubber starts hitting the road.
You think you've got health care, but you don't. You're paying millions and millions of dollars into salaries of organizations that contribute and add nothing to the value of health care. We don't need them. We have an organization called Medicare that knows how to do it very nicely. And,
Medicare and Medicaid.
And Medicaid as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's what Oregon Health Plan is, I think.
Yep.
And I've seen folks, I've known folks who have issues that got hit by a car on a bicycle or whatever, and it's really helped them a lot. And you know, they were young. There was no way they couldn't have even paid for the $1,000 for the ambulance ride.
Yep.
You know, which is probably more than that by now.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
So there's so many other issues. I was going to start at least get to the point where asking, you know, since you're both fairly progressive, well, you're very progressive and he's fairly progressive. What distinguishes you from Earl Blumenauer? But you've already kind of gone down that road already. What are some of the other? We've talked about trade and some of these other issues.
Well, certainly his support for the progressive agenda is really just lip service. The reality of what he does and the reality of what he stands for doesn't match his rhetoric. What we need is someone who is truly going to stand up, and I call it the Bernie agenda. I mean, the minimum wage. Where are we on a living wage? Where are we on health care for all? Where are we on college tuition?
I'm just going to say student debt. Yeah,
it's crazy.
That's a biggie.
It's crazy.
That's a time bomb. It's just going through time.
Yep. I mean, I'm one of the lucky ones. Same kind of thing. Our generation, you and I come from the same age pretty much, where, you know, I went to City College San Francisco in the early 70s for free.
That's the way it was in Redding, California.
In California, right.
And books were affordable too.
That's right. All I paid was some student fees, and yes, I bought books, but my tuition was paid for. I got almost 2 years of my college out of the way there, and then I went back to New York State and finished out there. And the New York State system was so well subsidized by the state of New York that it was like $600 a semester, including room and board. You know, so it was very affordable. I didn't come out with $100,000 worth of debt, you know, for a bachelor's degree that, you know, and then what do you do with it, you know? So one of the things I'm really pushing is, I was a vocational high school teacher initially, and vocational education, trade education, you know, supporting the unions through the trades, you know, those were good jobs. We don't need to create jobs for kids to work in retail. That's not, you know, you're not going to be able to buy a home. You're not going to be able to have what we used to call the American dream by working at Starbucks or working at, you know, TJ Maxx. You know, the jobs of the future are going to be around clean energy. The jobs of the future are still going to be around technology.
And healthcare.
And, you know, every kid in India learns to code by the time they're in 6th grade, you know.
Pretty much.
It's true. They realize that, you know, if you're going to have a future, you've got to prepare people for jobs for the future.
A lot of them do it around here, but they're called nerds. They're not called
That's
typical.
Right. And some of them are billionaires, right? That's right.
That's right.
Zuckerberg was not exactly your A student, you know.
No,
He was a geek, right?
But he, you know, he fell into it probably, but he still knew where he was when he fell into it. Yeah.
So there's a lot we can do. One of the other things I'm working on is a plan to create a Department of Innovation and Technology at the federal level, which would, because clearly the oil-based economy, whether, you know, Mobil, Exxon, they're going to fight it forever, but eventually it's going to be done. Clean energy is the way of the future. There's no question. You know, in California, you can see some of these wind farms down there.
Sure.
And Tesla is not.
And out the gorge.
That's right. Who's going to make all the, You know, cars are going to be driving themselves in the next 20 years for sure. You know, there's going to be, they're not going to be run on gasoline. They're going to be run on electric. And there's just going to be a whole technology revolution that's going to happen. You see it with the phones. You know, the whole, you know, transactions that happen now, you don't have to go to retail. Amazon is taking over, you know, the retail space is disappearing.
Sure.
So where do you have those jobs of the future? And it's going to be around technology, it's going to be around clean energy, and our government should be in the forefront of re-educating and rebuilding our economies. And yes, the whole infrastructure thing as well. You know, it amazes me every time people complain about the transportation going up to Vancouver. And you go over the bridge, 205, and the train goes over to the airport, but it doesn't go over the bridge. You know, it's like, well, why can't we commute? You can't commute by train from Vancouver. That's where all the traffic comes from.
Well, wasn't there a try to put a train in? And
yeah, but somebody just got to solve the problem, that's all. To just, you can blame Clark County or blame whoever you want to blame for not putting the money in. That's what the federal government's for. It's to help us solve those problems, you know, and work through those issues.
Well, transportation and communication both are getting from here to there, whether it's your voice or your thoughts or your body. That's really what it's all about.
Well, yeah, you see what Tesla's doing, right? You've probably seen that. He's going to build his own tunnel. He wants to, you know, build a tunnel in Chicago with his own private money and charge people $25 to go from South Chicago into the city on his own little private area.
So going into space wasn't enough for him.
That's right. Well, he's the one who's going to feed the space station. You know, NASA's not going to do it anymore.
Yeah, it's getting so, in some ways I don't like seeing that, because that just means corporations are becoming that much more innovative and more powerful than the government.
Well, you know, if the government isn't doing it.
I'm not saying that, you know,
right.
if the government isn't doing it, it has to be done.
I mean, I believe in free enterprise, and I think that that's not saying that I don't think. Government has a place, and government's place really is to provide for the safety and security of the American people. Not, you know, not to own TV stations, not to, you know, own the oil fields, you know. But there are things that the government should be doing that isn't doing. And I think that's what we really need to focus on. And to me, the biggest change is going to be the military. That's where the biggest problem is.
That's where all the money is going.
That's where all the money is going.
I mean, isn't that what basically killed the USSR?
Yep.
Was things like Afghanistan and the space race and all that, putting that money out, and it broke them.
Yep.
And we're
Reagan
going down
bankrupted the
road.
Soviet Union. Absolutely.
Right.
We outspent them.
And we're going down that same road. It doesn't seem like we've got any problems now, but you know, little here, a little bit there, you know, especially since you're factoring in the environment, and all of a sudden you're not going to have, you know, the necessarily the clean air or the water or the resources anymore.
Yep.
And that's all going to happen at once, probably.
Yeah, that's I mean, if you think about the scary part of what's happening, it is the environment. That is the scary part. You know, when we don't have clean water anymore, when we don't have clean air anymore. Oregon people don't even realize how we have some of the worst air quality of any county in the country.
Yeah, diesel here in Portland's terrible.
Yeah. Well, you know, we don't have protections like California does. So California, when diesel trucks can't pass the emissions, they send them to Oregon because we don't have those same controls. So we got all the old California trucks here.
I'm not
because
surprised.
Our standards aren't, you know, and it's like where I live up in North Portland. You look at all the trucks that's going there. You know.
Well, yeah.
So it's, but you know, it's a process that people have to take control over to fix those problems. And I hate to say it, but it takes new people in our government. The same old people are going to do the same old thing. That's why I was talking to this lady the other day, you know, who was a real Earl, you know, supporter, and I said, you know, if you want change, you know, and you don't change the people, why do you think anything's going to change?
What's that?
That's right, the old Einstein thing.
That's
right, insanity, right?
Yeah,
you know,
right.
You want things to change, but you keep bringing the same people back. You know, nothing's going to change that way.
Well, we're getting close to it. We're going to go a little over the half hour because this is an interesting conversation.
Well, no, I appreciate your time.
But one thing I would always want to know is, someone's going to say the old spoiler like Nader effect. So a lot of people vote for you, and on the other side, not meaning Blumenauer, but
well, there's no Republican running.
So in this case, you don't have that issue.
That's what's so interesting about this district is that there is no Republican. So, you know, that whole spoiler effect doesn't count here. You know,
in this particular race.
That's right.
Anyway.
In this particular race, there is no Republican. So it's a clear choice. Do you want to keep doing the same old things you've always done, the nice guy in the bow tie, or do you want to bring somebody here who really represents the things that you believe in? 57% of the Democrats in the primary voted for Bernie over Hillary. Hillary represents the old guard Democratic process, right?
Right.
The big party.
The
Earl
centrist,
is exactly the same way. I'm 100% in line with Bernie's agenda. So if you really believed as a Democrat that you wanted that progressive agenda, why would you not take a chance and vote for someone who clearly stands up for that agenda, as opposed to the person who you hear lip service, but he belongs to the party. His vote for Hillary makes it very, very clear that he's not for Bernie's agenda, or he would have voted for Bernie, but he wouldn't. Even before even Bernie ran, he already had committed to vote for Hillary. So no matter, even if 95% of the people had voted for Bernie over Hillary, he was committed to Hillary.
Well, you know, I think a lot of the Trump voters, if they didn't have the alt populism of Trump, would have probably voted for Bernie.
Right, that's true.
Because that's, to me, that's alt populism. That's not really populism like Bernie is.
Yeah, and people are now, there's a lot of dissension even amongst some of the fans of Bernie Sanders that, he opted out, he turned into the Democrat, and there's lots of issues. But they don't. But when you talk about the platform, though, you talk about Medicare for all and a living wage, and the things we need for student debt and stuff.
Yeah.
Nobody argues with that. Whether he is the right person for the future or not, that's another discussion. But the agenda is the agenda that the people in this district really want, and I think we might be able to do something pretty incredible here that, like I said, has never been done before. And it would send a message, as much as anything else, people say, well, what would you accomplish, one person? What we would accomplish is we would send a message, not just to Oregon, but to the country, that the progressive movement, you better get your shit together, Democrats, because this is what the progressive people really want. And if you're not willing to get that Pelosi out of there and get a really progressive Democratic Party, Donald's going to win again. That's the message of 2018. And if you see it all around, the progressive Democrats who are running against the old line Democrats, many of them are winning in the primaries, in their Democratic primaries, the more progressive Democrats. But the party's still hanging in there to the old stuff. They've got to drop that. They've got to commit to Medicare for all now, right away, top priority. If they would just come out and do that and say that, I'm afraid that they're going to lose again, because they're trying to hold on. All the big Democratic fundraisers are still the same old people, the same old corporations, the Democratic billionaires. That's right, the same old. It's time for a real political revolution, and if we can make a statement here, it'd be pretty incredible. I don't think I'm necessarily the most wonderful person ever to run, but it's really all about voting for that choice between the old line Democrat who's just not making any change and really bringing real change to the system. And that's what I'm trying to represent.
Bringing progress to progressive, huh?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. That's right.
It's about what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Before we get away, do you have any ideas on how you could probably slant the thing back towards unions being more popular?
Yeah,
because I know they have really. They just was one the other day that made the Supreme Court decision that really knocked down unions a little bit.
Yeah, we've got a problem in that when I talk to members of the unions, they're not even in line with their own union leadership. That's part of the problem. Union leadership still is committed to the Democratic Party. So their money goes to the Democratic Party because they figure that's their best hope over the Republicans.
Even though it hasn't worked in
That's
how
right.
long?
So they just keep doing that, even
Yeah.
though their membership are saying, no, we don't necessarily want to go that way. But so you have a small group of people in unions, leadership. I think the best way, there's some great stuff going on in unions in Portland, for instance. Burgerville is a good example.
Exactly.
For the first time in this country, people in that industry have organized. New Seasons, there's a battle going on at New Seasons as well. There's also people working to unionize even people like housekeepers in hotels. You know, there's a lot of underground or not seen union organizing activity. And again, this is the kind of place where that stuff can. The teachers is a great example of what's happening in the country. The teachers have really been fighting for rights now in West Virginia and in Wisconsin and, you know, Kentucky. There's all kinds of places now.
Shows what happens when you stand up and get together.
Yep.
But you got to get together, though.
That's right, and you've got to stand up to your own leadership, unfortunately. And that's the piece I was talking about with vocational education and trade schools. The unions should be the leaders back again, apprenticeship programs, you know, getting women into becoming electricians and carpenters and machinists. And, you know, that's how you're going to rebuild the unions, is by people wanting to get that education and training to get those great jobs that the union can provide. Because unfortunately, our public education system isn't spending money on trade schools anymore, on vocational schools. So where are you going to get it done from? You're going to get it done from a partnership of industry, government spending, and the unions. I think those three working together can revitalize the working class again. You know, I mean, I remember as a kid, you know, people say, "Oh, where'd manufacturing go?" If anybody's listening to this, if you asked how many of them know what a tool and die maker is, I don't know how many of them even know what that means. Well, you can't build.
Run a metal lathe.
You can't build anything in manufacturing if you don't know how to set up manufacturing. And where do those trades come from? They're not in it anymore. China builds everything. You know, why are they building everything? Because they have manufacturing capability. Their people learn how to do that kind of stuff. We don't know how to do that. We know how to write apps and how to make a good latte. You know, but who knows how to run like you said, a lathe or a mill or, you know, any kind of heavy equipment. We're not doing that anymore.
Well, it all was signaled by the what was it, I forget what it was called before, but now it's called the Rust Belt.
The Rust Belt.
You know, it all went away.
Yep. And that's okay too. There is a transition. I get that too. We don't want to have 300,000 women sitting at sewing machines sewing Levi Strauss jeans. You know, that's not the future of the kinds of manufacturing anymore. But you can have robotics building those things. You can have, like, Nike's a great example. I have a real problem with Nike. And, you know, they don't make a single thing in this country, right? All of their, you know, they sell sneakers.
Vietnam last time I heard.
Yeah, or they're Vietnam, or they go to China, or they go to Korea. Wherever the labor is cheapest, they just go rack and round. They don't care. But a company like New Balance, they make their shoes in the United States, their sneakers. It isn't like you can't make them in the United States, but Nike wants to maximize profits for its stakeholders. So who gives a crap how many jobs you export?
Who cares if
as long as Phil Knight's got $1 billion every year in his income every year? That's, you know, so yeah, he makes a $500,000 or $1 million contribution to a hospital wing or something. Everyone thinks he's wonderful. He buys beautiful uniforms for the football team, and he's a great guy. But what are the jobs? What are they doing there? You know.
He don't care if his workers are jumping out the third-story window, and like they did, I read. I think it was him in Vietnam. But
yeah, they've had a little bit of a come to reckoning a little bit in Nike and some of their management, particularly in terms of how they were treating women and things like that. But still, we can make things here in this country. We don't have to make things in other countries where you are totally dependent upon cheap labor. You can mechanize. You can create. You know, that's why I said I love innovation and technology and entrepreneurship. You know, that's what drives business. That's what drives the economy, not you know, sending jobs to low-wage countries to make crap like iPhones.
Soldiers.
Where are the iPhones made? You know, they're not made here.
They're not here, no.
Oh, Apple's got lots of money, but how many jobs? You know, how many real jobs?
Yeah, they've gotten a lot of flack for that recently too.
Yeah.
As well they should.
That's right.
Well,
so I think there's a time and place that this country is going to, you know, start to pull itself together. But yes, the Democrats are right. We do have to get rid of Donald. I mean, there's no question about that.
Right.
But you know, if they don't start paying attention to the millennials, the younger people in this country who are coming up, who are realizing that they don't have a great job, they don't have futures, they're, you know, what's happening in their world, they're getting smart, they're understanding, and they're pushing for a progressive agenda. Bernie was not a phenomenon, you know. He's the future. Whether him or his vision, that's where the future of this country is going to go.
Sure.
Or we're going to go down the tubes.
Well, I hope you can become a part of that. So
I'm hoping.
Yeah, well, we're getting down to the end of it for sure now, but I guess it's time for your vote for me speech here.
Well, like I said, it's all about a choice. That's all I want people to know is that they'll just be, right at this point, it's just him and me on the ballot in November. You know, Earl's not going to debate. He's already
That's a
made
big
it very
deal,
clear
I
that
think.
he won't debate. The media, unfortunately, not you, but the mainstream media is owned by big corporations. They will not pay attention to third parties. They have no desire whatsoever to break with the people who give them the big money. I don't have $50,000 for a media buy, right? So, you know, we have to work on social media. We have to go door to door. We have to do the kinds of things that we can afford to do, because I won't take PAC money or large corporation money. I've already made that very clear. But there are ways to reach people, and that's what we're trying to do. And we'll see what happens, you know.
I think that the reason why he won't want to debate with you is because it would give you more credibility, just like the dictator of North Korea. He won by as soon as he sat down at the chair. He was with the President of the United States. He won.
That's right. You heard Donald. He was a nice guy.
Nice guy, yeah.
He's very funny. Yeah, he murders hundreds of thousands of people, but he's a nice guy.
And puts them in gulags for their whole lives.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Well, Mark, I hope to heck you can really give him a run for his money, and
thank you
I
very
even
much.
hope further that you can even beat him.
Well, that's the hope. I think there is a path to victory. When I first started, people were saying, you know, you're out of your mind, you can't do this. But when you start talking to people and you look at Republicans don't want Earl, okay, vote for me. I'm not on their platform, but if you want an alternative to the Democrat, if you're a progressive, if you're a working man and woman, if you're a millennial, if you're a student, if you're an elder, if you're, you know, there are so many people who need something different. And he's not going to do it. He's just going to do what he always did. So it's time to give him his gold watch, thank him for his service, and move beyond that.
Jump in midstream there.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
thanks for your time.
Thanks again, Mark.
My pleasure.